Hi. Welcome to our session. My name is Bracha Rutner,
Hi, and I'm Hindi Fader.
and we are here tonight to talk to you about makeup, manicures, and mikveh. The beauty industry is a multi-billion-dollar industry. Naturally, women across the globe are wearing more beauty products. With this increase has come along more and more questions to yoatzot, such as Hindi and myself, about the implication of these beauty products and mikveh. Tonight, we wanted to share with you the different halachic issues that arise and the spectrum of opinions regarding these issues. We hope that you'll gain a deeper understanding of the halachic considerations and a deeper appreciation for the halachic opinions.
We're going to start tonight with a bit of background, looking at just a few primary sources before we can really delve in to the questions at hand. So the first thing that we're looking at in front of you on the slide right now is the most basic background from the Gemara that teaches us about the law of chatzitza. Okay, the word chatzitza means a barrier. And the type of chatzitza that we're dealing with tonight is a barrier that has the halachic status of invalidating the tevila. So the first source, chatzitza d'oraisa ninhu, the concept that barriers invalidate tefillah is of biblical origin, and it quotes a pasuk from Vayikra, "Verachatz b'mayim et kol basaro," and a person must immerse their entire body in the water. Shelo yehei davar chotzetz bein basaro lamayim. There should not be any barrier to immersion between your body and the water. The Gemara goes on to explain that biblically, in order for something actually to invalidate tevila, there are two considerations. There are two factors that must be met. Those two factors are rov and makbid. Dvar Torah, ruvo, umakbid alav chotzetz. Very generally, ruvo means something that covers most of the body or hair. Makbid is a little bit harder to define. We'll get back to it in just a moment. Makbid, translated very loosely, means something that you're particular about. So biblically, if the item that is blocking, that is covering your skin, that is blocking between you and the water, if it is something that covers most of your body and it's something that you're particular about, that would be a chatzitza. The rabbis came, the gazru, they made a decree, they made a gzeira, that even something that has one of those two factors, something that is either rov or makbid, is a barrier to immersion. Of course, this is the general norm that Chazal always do in order to protect the biblical law, to make sure that no one would ever immerse with something that is both rov and makbid. They indicated to us that we may not immerse with either something that is rov or makbid. Just to define those two categories a bit better, we made these very beautiful pictures for you. Consider the beige to be your body. And the first picture is very simple. Defining rov is pretty obvious. Rov means, again, something that's covering the majority of the body. Whatever that thing might be, it might be something that doesn't bother you too much, but if it covers most of the body, it is a chatzitza, it is a barrier to immersion. And again, the halacha, midrabanan, you may not immerse. And your immersion would be invalid if you immerse with something that is covering rov of the body. But the other factor, the factor of makbid, is much more difficult to define. It is a complex matter. In English, it's not the question of what English, specific word to use. Makbid, again, means something that you're particular about. But exactly what it means here, again, is somewhat debatable and is complex. Often, the word bothersome. Okay, often people define makbid, as you can see in the picture, it could be something small. It could be just a small little thing, but something that you don't really want there. Okay, something that bothers you. That is a definition that is often used to describe makbid. However, in looking a little bit more closely at a lot of the sources, we often see this phrase, makpid lahasiro. Often makbid is connected to the word makbid, particular to remove. And perhaps that's a little bit of a better definition of makbid. Makbid is not just something that bothers you, it's something that you plan to remove at some point. But of that definition too, it's not 100% simple, it's complex. We're going to see tonight different aspects and different questions about something that you're particular to remove. Perhaps there are exceptions to that rule. I'm going to share with you just one example to highlight a little bit about makbid. It's an example that somewhat relates to our area of makeup and manicures. It's a question of jewelry, and we paskin based on the Rishonim that a ring which is something that you might want to wear almost all of the time. It's something a ring that's very beautiful, that you like very much. A ring that is tight, that blocks the water from reaching your skin, is considered a chatzitza, because it's considered something that women are makbid about. Why? We explained, because it's something that women remove when they knead dough. Okay, today we don't necessarily knead dough as much as they did in the old days. Today we have mixers. Even if we make challah, sometimes we're not so, we're not immersed in our fingers are not, into the dough as much as they used to be. But the idea that you can see from that case is that a ring is something you want. A ring is something I'm not baking today. It's something that I might want most of the time. But the fact that it was taken off for this activity, which was a regular activity that women did, the fact that the ring was taken off in order to knead dough, even if it was only taken off, I don't know, for an hour, for 20 minutes, I don't know how long they were kneading for, that is considered makbid. Again, because it was removed, even temporarily, in order to do a different activity, it's considered makbid. I don't know if we would say that the ring bothered you, but the ring, of course, did in some way get in the way of the activity, and therefore a tight ring is considered makbid.
So looking at these different factors, the factor of rove and the factor of makbid, we have to ask ourselves what ultimately does need to be removed. And if we look in the Shulchan Aruch in Yoredeya, we see that he's consistent with the Gemara, that we are concerned for both rove or makbid. This is an important element, this concept of makbid, that's discussed by the Rishonim and also discussed within the Shulchan Aruch. And when we think about makbid, as Hindi was describing, something that we're particular about, perhaps we're makbid lahasiro, to remove. Who determines that definition of makbid lahasiro, of deciding or defining something that we're particular about? Does it follow the majority of the population? Something that the majority of the population would consider that they would want to remove or would bother them? Or would it be something that would depend on the individual standard? So if we look within the Shulchan Aruch, and also this is a discussion within the Rishonim, he says, "Va'afilu kol shehu, im derech bnei adam lefamim lahakpid alav, chotzetz afilu im ena mekaperet alav ata, o afilu eno mekaperet alav laolam, kevan shederech rov bnei adam lahakpid alav chotzetz." That, therefore, what the Shulchan Aruch is saying, that in practice, a barrier of any size, a kol shehu, is considered a chatzitza if it ultimately will be removed. And even when the woman herself might not mind the barrier's presence, either when she's immersing or in other circumstances, if she would normally remove it at some other time, as Hindi was talking about in terms of the ring, that when she was kneading dough, it would be considered a chatzitza. And if it's something that most women would be particular about, then it would also be considered a chatzitza, even if the individual herself might not necessarily mind its presence. And so we see that the Shulchan Aruch is really machmir, he's really stringent in both directions. That however we define a chatzitza, it depends on whichever is the most strict, the individual woman's practice or the practice of the majority of the community. Now, even if we're talking about a chatzitza, how we're defining makbid, because that's really the consideration and the main concern when we're thinking about tefillah and what's considered a chatzitza. The Ramah comes along and presents to us a custom, and an important custom, that even something that's not technically a chatzitza, lichatchila, a woman should not immerse with it, and she should go ahead and remove it. And he says, "Lechatchila lo titvol afilu b'dvarim she'inam chotzatzim." One should go ahead and not immerse in anything, even if it's lechatchila, even if it's not considered a chatzitza. Now, this is a custom that is accepted by most Ashkenazim and by many Sephardim, but not all Sephardim. And really, it's a precautionary measure. And we will see how this factor of both our definition of makpid and how it plays out, and also the minhag of the Ramah, the chumrah of the Ramah, how it also plays out when we get to our discussions about nail polish and other issues. But first, Hindi's going to go ahead and let's go ahead now and summarize in terms of halacha of what is considered a hakpada, what is considered a chatzitza for tefillah. So when we look at the Torah, according to the Torah, something that is rove and makpid, that would be a chatzitza, and a woman would not be able to be tovel if she had a chatzitza that was rove and makpid. In that situation, her tefillah would be invalid. When we look at Dirabanan, the rabbinic law, a chatzitza that would invalidate tefillah would be something that would be either rove or makpid. It would be something that would cover the majority of her body, or it would be something that would bother her, she'd be particular about, or as Hindi was talking about in terms of makpid lahasiro. Now, even if both factors don't apply, even if it's not necessarily a classic definition of a chatzitza, the minhag Ashkenaz of the Ramah is that we ultimately lichatchila, we remove everything. Because this is a minhag, there may be, as we will learn, some exceptions to the rule. Now, when we think about all of these different factors, there are some other additional factors that we need to go ahead and take into consideration.
Okay, so the next thing we're going to talk about now that we have the basics, okay, we know a little bit about the definition of chatzitza, chatzitza d'oraisa, d'Rabbanan, and the minhag. Our next step to prepare us for discussing the beauty products that we'd like to discuss tonight is to look at one more source, one final source from the Rishonim. And this source is really probably the most important source in understanding our topic tonight. The Rashba talks about color. Okay, that women used to place on their hair, the hair dye, we're used to that as well. And again, color that they placed on their face and on their hands. And like I said, this color doesn't seem to be exactly like the makeup of today. It's perhaps more comparable to a henna. If people are familiar with that, it's a type of stain. And here's what he says about it. Nashim shetzovot serotan lenoi, women that color their hair for beauty. Mistaber shein chotzetz. It seems to me, it makes sense that it is not a barrier to immersion. It is not a problem for tevilah. Dinoihu lahem, because it's beautiful for them. Ve'ena makpidot la'asiro le'olam. And they are never particular about removing it. Here's that language, makpid lahasiro. They're never particular about removing it. The Rashba goes on, adarabba, on the contrary, chozrot u'mechadshot oto tamid lenoi. They go back and they replenish it when the color fades. They go back and they add more color, always for the purpose of beauty. And he goes on to add a very interesting and important halacha. The color that women use to dye their hair, just like we do today, covers the entire hair. And what did we say before? Before, when we talked about these categories, when we think back to that picture of the beige circle with the pink on top, we said even if you don't mind the pink, okay, when something covers robe of the body or the hair, we count the hair separately for this category, it would be a chatzitza. But here there is an exception to the rule. Here it's different. Kan makpedet v'rotza liot sham. Here he plays on that same word. He is actually particular about having that color there. And in this case, these cases of Lanoi, harehu ki'ilu humigufo shel seir. It's as if the color becomes part of her hair, or in the other cases, part of her body. And for that reason, there's this very important exception to the general norm. Even if the color covers most of the hair or all of the hair, it is not a chatzitza. The Rashba goes on to say, "V'od yira." It also seems she'ein mamasho b'seyar. There is no substance. We're going to need these words, so I'm going to try to define, and forgive me if I use the Hebrew. I'll try to always give the English too. But mamasho, again, means substance, something tangible. He says, in addition to the reason I gave you before, that the color is beautiful and they never want to take it off. In addition to that, there's no tangible substance to the color. It absorbs directly into the hair, into the hands, he continues to say, and therefore it is not a chatzitza. Okay, so this Rashba really gives us, the background that we need. Other Rishonim talk about this as well with a little less detail than the Rashba, which is why the Rashba here is of great importance. I also like to note that this particular tshuva of the Rashba concludes with him saying that he had the schus, he had the opportunity to go over this halacha with his Rebbe, the Ramban, and the Ramban agreed with him. So this again is the opinion of the Rashba, the Ramban, many other Rishonim. And just the very, very bottom of the slide, this is how he paskin. The Shulchan Aruch doesn't give a lot of detail. He just says very simply, tseva, color, shetzovot hanashim, that women color, al paneihem v'yadeihem v'se'ar roshan, whether they use that color, again, it seems it's referring to a dye, whether they use that color on their face, on their hands, or on their hair, it is not a chatzitza. Okay, so the next step, as we move on to the next slide, is we're going to just look a little more carefully at this Rashba, try to analyze it a little bit better, really to help us figure out what can we learn from here, how can we apply this Rashba, which is lahalacha, how can we apply this Rashba to modern day beauty products. Okay, so the first thing that we need to do, the first question that we need to ask, again, when trying to figure out if it's comparable to today's makeup, nail polish, or hair extensions, is what's with the Rashba's two reasons. Okay, the Rashba started with this discussion of noi. It's beautiful, you always want it there. And then he said, and also it has no mamashos. And also it doesn't have a tangible substance. And therefore it is not a chatzitza. So many, Rishonim and Achronim in particular ask and wonder about this question. Why does he give two reasons? Do we need both reasons in order to say that these products were not a barrier to immersion? So there is a debate, okay? And there are very important achronim on both sides. But this first point is not going to be our major problem as we move forward and very soon begin to discuss the beauty products that we're discussing tonight. Because there are important achronim who argue emphatically that as long as you have one of those factors, linoi, or no mamashos, that is a sufficient reason to say that a substance is not a chatzitza. Why did the Rashba give two reasons? It's better to give two reasons. He had two reasons to give. He's going to explain two ideas because both ideas are true. Okay, so we will, as we can start considering different beauty products, we will point out, okay, that all of the beauty products we discussed tonight, you can't really say they have no mamashos. They're all substances that you can feel, as opposed to hair dye. Hopefully, again, if you, and I don't know, maybe really, really bad, job by a salon, or if you do it yourself, maybe it has mamashos. Usually, hair dye, you cannot feel it. It absorbs into the hair. So we are going to point out this factor as we continue. In particular, the reason it's good to point it out is because even though we do say that either factor is sufficient, linoi or no mamashos, l'chachila, many achronim say, if you can, we'll be machmir. L'chachila, if you stain your hand with something not beautiful, if your pen opens and you have ink and you have a stain on your hand, you probably remember learning as a kala that your kala teacher said, oh, try to soak it so it fades. So we try to consider both the factors. We want things that are both noi and no mamashos, but the reality is that there is room to be lenient, either on something that has no mamashos or something that is linoi. But it's the next point that I make that is the point, that is the most important point that we need to consider, that really sets us up for the debate that we're going to explain to you tonight. And that question is just a little bit more, a better understanding, what is this category of linoi? Because the Rashba didn't just say it was linoi. He said it's linoi and women are never makbid to remove it. Okay, he said they're never makbid to remove it and they keep reapplying it for beauty. Okay, so the question that we need to ask is, was that color ever removed or was it only replenished? And does it matter? Okay, there's room to argue about the mitzias. I think most assume, again, thinking about dyes, they're not very removable. Okay, you put them there and they fade. But the real question is Is that important? Is that something that would prevent us from learning from that halacha to our products? Because the products that we use today are a little different with regard to that factor. Okay, so the main question, as you can see by that pink arrow, can the leniency of noi apply to things that are removed, that don't just fade? Now, we said on the previous slide, noi is better than Eino Makbid. When something is beautiful, even if it covers rove of the body, that's okay. You can go be total with it. But what about Makbid? If something is beautiful, but there is a form of hakpada, you remove it, and maybe there are times where it bothers you, then can you say that there is a leniency of noi? That is the question. Okay. The next thing, just to connect back to what we were talking about before, point one, everything here that I put under number one on the slide is all about questions of, figuring out if there's a chatzitza problem with the beauty products that we're dealing with now. But number two is equally important. Even if the products that we discuss are not a chatzitza, we must consider again and again, must the product be removed because of the chumrah of the Ramah, the chumrah l'chachila that we spoke about, to take off everything. Again, we're taking off everything because we don't want to make a mistake. We don't want to accidentally leave something on that is a chatzitza. So we have this long-standing custom. Perhaps even if beauty products are not a chatzitza, we need to be concerned for the minhag of the Ramah and remove them as best we can. Again, in a situation of l'chachila, again, and in a situation where we're before the fact and we're preparing for the mikveh. The final thing that I want to say before we jump in and really talk about the products is just a quick mention. Hair dye is not a chatzitza, and we assume you can wear hair dye l'chachila. Don't worry. Okay, so the Ramah's chumrah to remove everything, it is basically accepted across the board that the chumrah of the Ramah does not extend to the hair dye. Okay, but you have to keep in mind that there were so many reasons to be lenient with hair dye. The chumrah of the Ramah, perhaps you can say, does not extend to hair dye because it was absolutely, hair dye was never removed. It has a very strong level of permanence. In addition, of course, the issue of lanoi and hair dye has no mamashas. So don't worry about hair dye. That's not a problem for the minhag of the Ramah, but perhaps some of the other products would be. And we're about to start. Bracha will take over now and tell us a little bit about our first and our main topic of the night. Really our main topic. We're going to focus most of our attention on nail polish.
Okay, so now we're up to the question of nail polish, as Hindi said. This is, of all the beauty products, the most ubiquitous and also the most complex from a halachic perspective. What we see here, which are the characteristics of polish and some of the other beauty products that we will discuss tonight, and the potential problems, we look at 4 different specific factors. So the first one, which was mamashut, which was, is it a tangible substance? Certainly nail polish is a layer on your nail and it's not absorbed. It may be that it is lanoi, which we're going to go ahead and discuss soon, which, as we saw in the Rashba and is the case for other Rishonim, that the issue of lanoi and the issue of mamashut, that there may be room for leniency in it, but we'll get there. But then the question is, what about the hakpada issue? When we look at nail polish, we see that a woman is likely, remembering that hakpada is something that will likely be removed in the future at some point. Nail polish is an item that will be removed. It's not something that will fade on its own or go away on its own. A woman would go ahead and remove that nail polish, even if whether it's regular nail polish, which she may remove on a more regular basis, or gel nail polish or powder gel, which may last slightly longer. Now, what if you're in a situation that you remove it, but you're removing it simply to go ahead and put new nail polish on? There may be women who do that yes, you're going to get it removed because you're going to the salon. You can't remove it on your own, but you're removing it because you want to go ahead and apply it right away. In that situation, it may not necessarily be considered makbid, and therefore there may be room for leniency in that type of situation. However, thinking about that, nail polish is removed pretty regularly. And when we remove it, we don't always want to put back on, or a woman doesn't always want to put back on the same exact color. she's not taking off and putting back on the same exact nail polish. Women do change their polish. And also, there may be times when women don't want to wear polish at all, either because there's a preference, or they may feel that it's healthy at some point, which it may very well be, to go ahead and take a break at some point and not to wear nail polish. Now, there may be some women who want the same color all the time and go ahead and always want to have nail polish, and that might also be an exception to the rule. But that would be a situation that one would go ahead and ask. Now, thinking about all these different factors, the mamashu, the fact that a woman will at some point likely want to remove the nail polish or need to remove the nail polish, the fact that a woman changes regularly, and women don't necessarily want the polish all of the time, there really is a debate amongst poskim about how we paskin and how we consider nail polish. Would nail polish, as a result of all of these, be considered a chatzitza? Now, some poskim, including the U.S. Nishmat Rabbanim, Rabbi Kenneth Alman, and Rabbi Gedalia Berger, are really concerned that because of all of these factors, that nail polish may very well be a chatzitza, even if it's perfectly applied. We'll talk about not perfectly applied nail polish soon, but it may very well be a chatzitza, and therefore would be a problem to go ahead and immerse with that nail polish. Now, there may be situations of shad hatzchak, which are exceptional situations, which we will go ahead and define soon. Now, there are other poskim that say that, going back to Hindi's big issue of lanoi, that this is really not halachically significant. There's no halachic significance between the nail polish and the color that the Rashba and the Shulchan Aruch talk about, which means that these poskim really focus on the issue of lanoi. And for them, because nail polish is lanoi, therefore all the other factors fall away and is not a chatzitza, and therefore, based on because it's not a chatzitza, perhaps a woman could go ahead and immerse in it. Now, even for those poskim, there's still another consideration that we have to take into account, which is the minhag of the Ramah. Even for the poskim that say that it really is not a chatzitza, because it really is lanoi, because why is a woman putting nail polish on? She's putting nail polish on because she wants to beautify her nails. She wants to beautify herself. So for those opinions that it's really lanoi is the deciding factor, and it's not a chatzitza, they would say lechatchila, that when we have to go ahead and remove everything, we have to be concerned for the minhag of the Ramah, and therefore lechatchila, a woman should go ahead and remove the nail polish. Now, there are other poskim who are concerned about another factor. They are concerned about the minhag of the Ramah, but they're also concerned about about a woman's commitment to going to the mikveh. Meaning, if a woman would potentially not go to the mikveh, or not necessarily want to go to the mikveh because she would have to go ahead and remove her nail polish, that may be a situation where a woman who would go ahead and, or women would be allowed to go ahead and immerse with the nail polish. So we see this two different groups of thought, and also not all Sephardim follow the minhag of the Ramah. So we see these two different considerations. On the one hand, we're trying to determine, is nail polish a chatzitza? And we see here that there is a debate. One, it may be a chatzitza, according to Rabbi Alman and Rabbi Berger, or other poskim say that it may not be a chatzitza because it is lanoi. And then, of course, we certainly have to be concerned for the minhag of the Ramah. And Hindi will go ahead and give us a good summary.
Josh, I think, really summarized for us already, so I don't need to add much on this slide. The slide is just trying to show you that you can kind of end up in the same place, from two different angles. Okay, our first question is nail polish a chatzitza. You might say yes. In this case, again, Ray Bergen and Ray Alman are not saying a definite yes. okay? Because if they were saying it is absolutely a chatzitza, there would be no leniency. There would be no room to rely on other opinions, in other situations. But they have exactly like Bracha said, they have a concern. They're not, the definition of makbid, like we said, it's very complex, and there is some room for debate. But they are concerned. They are seriously concerned that nail polish is a chatzitza. Still, they would rely on a more lenient opinion, b'shat hadchak. Okay, we're going to define b'shat hadchak a little better in just a moment. Okay, so you can end up saying, let's just be lenient b'shat hadchak, just simply based on the fact that you're concerned that is a chatzitza. Somebody else, a different Rav, who might not be concerned with the chatzitza factor, because again, as we said, they think anything that's lanoi, even if it's removed, is fine. They would still consider the minhag of the Ramah, and it's possible that they would end up in a similar place, that they would say, you should remove it l'chachila, and it should be permitted b'shat hadchak. Okay. The third opinion, which Bracha explained on the previous slide, is a little different. It's not about an individual woman. It's not about saying, you particular woman, we will be lenient on you b'shat hadchak. That everybody considers. Okay. That's the nature of shat hadchak. It's a personal question with a personal answer. But the other opinion is that in this case, for the general population, okay, those rabbis argue that it's worth suspending the minhag. Again, not because one individual woman is upset, but because perhaps the society at large, perhaps there are a lot of women that it'll taint their experience with mikveh. They'll feel annoyed if they have to always plan their polish around mikveh, and if it messes with their plans, it will give them a tremendous frustration. And those rabbanim say, again, you can suspend the minhag, permit tefillah l'chachila, we can put the Ramah aside in consideration of the general feelings of the general population. So now we're ready to talk a little bit more about this phrase we keep using, b'shat hadchak, and what types of situations perhaps are considered a shat hadchak and we can be lenient with regard to nail polish. Okay, so the top of the slide just says that at the end of the day, those boxes to the side, the boxes that said we're concerned, we're going to be machmir l'chachila, mekel b'shat hadchak, that is the most typical approach of the U.S. Ashkenazic poskim. And I use those two words on purpose. There's a little bit more of a split in Israel, and there's a split with Sfardim for good reason, as we said before. But among the U.S. Ashkenazic poskim, machmir l'chachila, the goal is we want to be strict, we want to remove polish, but there is room to be lenient in certain situations. So what situations are we talking about? What might be a shat hadchak? Here I put two things. There could be others, okay? But these are two examples that are somewhat common, especially the first example. When a woman has a gel polish, okay, and this would not be the case with the old-fashioned regular polish that it's not too hard to remove. It might take a few minutes. You might need to, slow down and use a Q-tip and scrub a little. But when you're dealing with gel polish, it is difficult to remove without a salon. And therefore, if a woman shows up to the mikveh with perfectly applied polish, she shows up to the mikveh and for whatever reason, she forgot to remove it. She didn't remove it. She did not have access to a salon. Okay, recently in the past year, this happened a lot. There were tons of questions about nail polish when there were times where salons were closed because of COVID. So many questions of this same nature. And even our Rabbanim, even Rabbi Alman and Rabbi Berger, they too were makil in cases where they thought the polish was truly beautiful, was truly perfect. They were makil because if a person tried to remove that gel polish on their own, what might happen is that they would end up with a definite chatzitza. They would end up with residue that they could not remove. That's definitely not beautiful. That is something that everybody would agree women are makbid about. There would be no room for leniency, and that would, again, push a woman's immersion off who knows for how long until she could figure out how to get it off. Okay, so in that situation, many Rabbanim are makil. They consider that a pressing hour, a shat hadchak, where there's no other choice but to say, better to immerse with the perfect polish than to try to take it off on your own. I wrote here, just in brackets, it is important to keep in mind that if you ever think you have a shat hadchak, you should consult both with your local Rav and with your local mikveh, because sometimes the mikvahs follow one Rav and not another Rav, and each mikveh has its own policy. Some mikvahs will not permit immersion, even with a gel polish. So call in advance just for your own good. Perhaps there are other mikvahs available to you. The second thing that we want to talk about when it comes to a shat hadchak And this is much more complex than number one. This complex issue is a woman that feels, in particular, that removing the polish would cause her tremendous emotional distress. Okay, and the only time I feel that you can really argue such a thing is women that are particularly upset if they have an immersion on Shabbos or on Yom Tov. Because at those times, when we leave the house, okay, maybe that this one, number two, didn't apply as much this year as in other years. Number one applied more this year. If you go to shul every Shabbos, or even worse, if you're making a simcha, okay, and everybody's looking at you, and you wear polish all the time, and then you show up that one Shabbos or Yom Tov in shul without polish, and it's going to make you truly embarrassed. In such a situation, you should and you can consult for a personal psak. Everybody's different. Okay, some women, it might bother them a little. I don't know that we would call that a sharat chak. But if it's really distressful, if it makes a woman really sad, and she's really embarrassed, and she's really concerned to go through Shabbos without polish on her hands, that is a case where a person can consult, again, for a psak that's just for them, to address this issue, again, of tefillah with polish on Shabbos or Yom Tov. That might be a sharat chak. It just depends on personal circumstance and feelings. Okay. Now we'll look at some pictures, I think. Okay. So Bracha, you're going to help me out with this one. We put 4 different pictures here. And let me just give you a moment of background, and then we'll talk about each picture. Anybody that's going to allow immersion with polish, okay, whether you're of the opinion that it's more broad and polish is okay, whether you take that approach or you take the approach of the U.S. Ashkenazic poskim that we discussed before, that mostly say we're only going to permit polish b'shat chak. Everybody agrees when you permit polish, it has to actually be linoy. It has to be beautiful. Okay, the minute polish doesn't look so good, it's a chatzitza for sure. There's really very little room for leniency if polish doesn't look good anymore. But this is so subjective. You guys look at these pictures. Do you think this polish looks good? Bracha, what do you think? Tell me what you think. Tell us what you think about, I don't know, picture number 1. What's going on in picture number 1, Bracha?
So if you look at picture number 1, it looks like there's some kind of scratches on it. And it looks like
that's more like number 2.
Number 2. So number 1 is a little bit hard to see. If you look at where the arrow is, so there's a little chip. There's a little chip there. There's a little something there. And in that situation, the woman is asking, is this really considered perfect polish because there's a chip? So Hindi, what do you think about that?
It's so not simple. And again, when you deal with this question, think back to what Bracha said before in that slide in the Shulchan Aruch. You have to consider both the woman herself and the norm in the, of people that wear polish. You have to consider the whole society. So it's a very difficult question. Certainly if the woman herself is bothered by it, it's a chatzitza. She can't go. Let's say she's not bothered by it. In that particular picture, because of the color of the polish and the color of her skin, can you argue that most women wouldn't be bothered by it? It's hard. It's very hard. And these are tough questions. And again, if you have a question like this, you should consult with your local Rav or Yoetzet to get a personal answer. It is difficult to be lenient about the polish that we see in picture number 1, because many women wouldn't really call that perfect. If they had an opportunity to go back and fix it, I think they would. That's my thoughts about picture number 1. Picture number 2 is Bracha, is the one you were looking at where there's like very subtle scratches. What do you think about that?
Right. Also, Hindi, what you just said about a woman, if she had the opportunity to fix that, she might really go back to the salon and say, you know what, I want to go ahead and fix it because of those scratches, because it's really not perfect. And looking at that, it might really, really bother her.
Yeah, it's a hard one too. Also, I think it's hard because it's somewhat subtle. Looking to picture number 3, I think that's pretty clear. Yeah. I think picture number 3, and what's interesting about picture number 3 again is, the polish itself stayed on really good. An excellent polish job. It's probably a gel. Okay, it stayed on probably for a few weeks already, and her nail has grown out. But I think everybody would say that at that stage, it doesn't really look great. Sometimes people use the question, would you go to a wedding like that? I don't know. I wouldn't want to go to a wedding with polish number 3. It's pretty noticeable that I got my polish on 2-3 weeks ago. So number 3, I think is pretty clear. Do you agree, Bracha?
Yeah.
Okay, so the question again, the last one here, and I'm not going to, I don't know. I think number 4 is really, there's room for debate. Bracha, what do you think about polish in the picture number 4?
I also think, because if you look at some of the different nails, which is also an issue, they look a little bit different.
I know.
It's
The
close
effects
to
happen even right when you
perfect,
leave the salon. It's
right,
like,
but it's not quite perfect, right? What
no.
is right? That's a great question, Hindi. What happens when you leave the salon? Did the woman leave? Sometimes there is space between the
Yeah.
nail and the polish. It doesn't necessarily meet the cuticle right directly. So did it look like this when she left the salon?
Right. Okay,
You
so these
know?
are all really good questions. And you have to think of this. When you think about everything else we've said tonight, again, everything we've said so far about polish, those who are lenient, whether they're lenient more consistency or they're lenient b'shat hatzchak, the polish needs to look great. I don't know if any of these pictures look great. So always do consult for a personal psak. And again, you have to take into account and you have to be honest about how you feel about the polish. And then somehow you got to get a consensus. The yoatzot sometimes consult with each other. These are actually pictures from a WhatsApp chat. The yoatzot consult. What do you guys think? It's not always easy to define what rove of the population thinks. Okay, we're not doing a careful, we're not doing careful scientific, analysis here. It's a little difficult. So that's always a bottom line where you have to consider, even for the most lenient opinions. Okay, are we ready to move on?
Yeah. Now, makeup, it's still a question, it's still a consideration. It's a little bit potentially less complex than nail polish, but we still have to look at all of the different considerations. Again, here we see these 4 considerations. Makeup definitely does have some mamashut, it does have some substance, but it's a little bit different than nail polish in the sense that nail polish you might wear for a longer period of time. You may remove it a little bit less often. But if you think about makeup, makeup's really being put on freshly every day. We remove it nightly. A woman really should remove it nightly. There might be exceptions to that rule if she has a simcha, and she's putting it on for Shabbat. But in general, a woman is putting fresh makeup on daily. She's taking it off every single night. People go ahead also thinking about the factor of changing colors. They don't always want the same makeup, right? There are new styles that come about. She might try new mascara, new eyeliner. She might try new makeup and try new colors. And also sometimes women want to be makeup free. I think more often perhaps than women want to have their nail polish removed. They really want to go ahead and be makeup free.
Even just for the night.
Even just for the night. So it's really hard to say that women always want the makeup there because likely they really want to at some point take it off. So that we have to go ahead and it's really hard then to go ahead and say that women really, really wants it to be there. Now we need to take all of these things into consideration, and it might be harder to go ahead and be more lenient during the week. Of course, we have to remember the chumrah to remove everything, which we'll come back to. But what happens when a woman has to go to the mikveh on Friday night? And that, Friday night or Shabbat, Friday night or Yom Tov. Not having makeup on Shabbat or Yom Tov, especially for a woman who's a regular makeup wearer, right? Hindi mentioned a woman who has a simcha, right? And that people are looking at her. A woman who's really a regular makeup wearer, it may be more obvious. It is likely more obvious that when she's not wearing that makeup, and she might feel very uncomfortable not having her makeup on for Shabbat, and it might be very distressing for her, that issue that Hindi brought up, for her to go the entire Shabbat or go the entire Yom Tov without having makeup on her face. So for a woman who would wear Shabbat makeup, and one should go ahead and definitely consult their local rabbi about Hilchot Shabbat and whether a woman can go ahead and wear Shabbat makeup, then in that case, likely lechatchila, she really should remove the makeup, because then she can go home, she can go ahead and put makeup on after her tefillah, and it will be less noticeable because she'll show up to shul in the morning or to visit her friends the next day with or go to a meal with makeup on her face because she wears that Shabbat makeup. For someone who might not wear Shabbat makeup, this might be more of a question. Now, we always have to go ahead and remember the issue of Lanoi, that makeup really is just like nail polish. Makeup really is lanoi. And therefore, there are poskim who are lenient about makeup.
Mishat
Hatchak. Now, the consideration, though, when it comes to lanoi, is that we have to make sure that the makeup doesn't run. Because if it runs in the water and it gets ruined, then it's really not lanoi, and then that could go ahead and really be a problem. And then that whole leniency of lanoi really is not really there and is a problem. But one should go ahead and consult in this situation.
Right.
Now, go ahead.
Yeah, we're going to talk a little bit about permanent lash extensions. We'll start, I think, with a short video.
Mm-hmm.
It's a very exciting video. It's coming. Okay, now that looked cool, right? Tonight, okay, we're going to talk about permanent lash extensions. And we have to distinguish that from other types of lash extensions. There are strips of lashes that are put on for the day. There are lashes that are put on for the week. What we're talking about tonight is only that type of application, the permanent lash extensions. As you could see from the video, these lashes are glued one by one. Okay, that black substance was some type of crazy glue. They are attached one by one to your natural lashes. Super cool process. And those lashes remain indefinitely. Okay, those lashes are not meant to be removed ever. Okay, rather what happens is that as your natural lashes shed, and this will happen regularly. Every woman is different, and every lash on your eyes is going to fall out on a different schedule. Each lash is on its own cycle or whatever it is. But this is going to happen somewhat regularly, and that's how you'll lose these lashes, and then you'll need to replace them. So again, as your natural lashes shed, you will need to go back as you grow fresh lashes and go back to the salon and reapply or add new long lashes. There's usually monthly maintenance with this product. Okay, so we have to go back and consider all of the things we just considered, all the things we considered in terms of nail polish, all the things we considered in terms of makeup. This is definitely mamashos, maybe more than the other two cases. Okay, we're adding a substance, we are attaching a fake lash, which has clear substance, to your natural lash. But like we said, that's not usually the biggest problem. Okay, the other considerations. Here, there's actually room for leniency because something that is truly permanent, something that you attach and affix to your body with zero intention of ever removing. A good example is a filling, okay, a permanent filling that you have in your teeth. It's put there, it's supposed to stay. Once in a while, you have to go back. That's not the intention. It is meant to last. Something that is truly permanent is by definition not a problem of Mikveh. You can argue that perhaps these lashes are close to that. Not exactly like that, but they're close to that. Okay, these lashes, like we said, they're not usually removed. They don't need removal. People that want to wear these lashes continuously, they will not take them off, and rather, even when the lash sheds, even when you lose that extra extension, you're only going to lose it as part of the natural hair. It's the natural hair that's going to fall out and take that extra lash with it. So there's never going to be a separation. And again, in most cases, for somebody that wants to continue wearing these lashes going forward, there won't ever be a separation between the natural lash and the extension. Okay, so like I said, it's close to permanent. Again, why am I saying close? They can be removed. Sometimes people might try this out. They might try permanent lash extensions and decide, I don't know, cost too much money or whatever it might be. I don't need it. Okay, so if you plan to remove them, a person that doesn't plan on going back the next month, what's going to happen is at some point, you know, she'll have some of those long lashes and then she'll have some shorter lashes. And at that stage, first of all, as I noted on the bottom to remind myself, it might not look so good. At that stage, We're losing our, consideration of lannoy. It really is something that you don't like. And in that situation, you can buy products that help you remove those lashes. So again, if you plan on removing those lashes, we're not going to rely on what I'm about to say. But if you don't, if you're a regular lash extension wearer, there are strong reasons to argue that permanent lash extensions are not a chatzitza, again, because they're placed, never to be removed. Even when they fall off with your natural hair. They fall off with your natural lash, and there is there's usually no plan to separate them from your natural lash. But of course, we have to go back to the minhag of the Ramah. We have to consider questions of chatzitza here, more room for leniency than what we've seen before. But the minhag of the Ramah was to move everything. It's a difficult question. Because I told you before that when it comes to hair dye, we assume that the minhag of the Ramah doesn't apply because that hair dye is placed and really the plan is never to remove it. Okay, even people, it really stays there. Even people that decide to stop coloring their hair, either they'll just let it grow out or they'll maybe switch to a different color as it, in order to make it look more normal. But the hair dye is not meant to be removed and it's not easily removed. Okay, it's not that hard to remove it if you wanted to. So it's a little bit complex in terms of the question of the lechachila minhag of the Ramah. The Rabbanim that I discussed, this with at Nishmat, they're not sure. They think it's debatable. They do argue that perhaps you can say that these lashes, because of how permanent they are, perhaps you can say that the minhag of the Ramah didn't extend to this, as the minhag of the Ramah did not extend to hair dye. So you can suggest that, but because it's a little complex, you discuss it with the Rabbanim, and they're somewhat hesitant. If a woman already has the lashes, they absolutely both Rabbanim, Rabbi Alman and Rabbi Berger, that the US Yoatzot often consult with, both of them said it is okay to immerse. They're not concerned that it is a chatzitza. It is okay to immerse if you have these lashes already. In terms of if you're not sure, you're asking the question, should I get these lashes? They didn't say no. You have to consult with your local Rav. There are considerations both ways in terms of this question. Is it a problem according to the minhag of the Ramah? So please, again, look for a personal psak if you're interested in getting these super cool and beautiful lashes.
Okay, so let's now look at our last issue of the night, which is hair extensions. Hindi and I had to do a lot of research both on all these different topics to really gain a deeper understanding, because in order to understand the halachic considerations and how to apply all of these different topics, you really have to understand the mitzias. You really have to understand the practicality, the process of all of these different beauty products. And each one, as we've seen so far, is complex. And hair extensions come with their own set of complexities because, as we see here in the different pictures, there are all sorts of different ways that one can go ahead and have hair extensions. Now, what's not included in this is sometimes before a woman gets married, she may, or in other situations, she may have hair extensions that are just clip-ins. Those clip-ins are easily taken on and off and are definitely, one should not immerse in this. But this is not what we're talking about here in this situation. These are ones that are permanent or semi-permanent, which we put in quotation marks because we're defining loosely as permanent or semi-permanent. We'll see how that plays out and what that really means. So once again, we have to go ahead and look at the different considerations as we've seen so far that emerge from the Gemara, the Shulchan Aruch, the Rashba, and certainly remembering the minhag of the Ramah and all of this in terms of whether or not hair extensions would be a problem to immerse with. So when it comes to mamashu, they are clearly a separate foreign object. They're definitely a distinct foreign object in somewhat of a similar fashion to the eyelashes, but a little bit different. They are a foreign object being put onto a woman's head. Now, there are many types that last for more than a month, which perhaps in and of itself might be potentially a room for leniencies. Now, there may be other situations, not talking about hair extensions, that when there's a medical need for an item, say a cap or a filling, as Hindi mentioned in passing, that the length of time that the item that is on a woman's body might be a factor, especially if that is not necessarily a specific amount of time, and or excuse me, especially if it is a specific amount of time, meaning it's for a longer amount of time and it can't be removed earlier. That might be a situation where we would be lenient. That's not what we're talking about, though, with hair extensions here. We're not talking about the fact that it can't be removed earlier than a certain amount of time, or it must be there for a specific amount of time, or it's a medical need. This is something that is done for beautification, and a woman could go ahead and have it removed at any point in time. So even though it lasts for a long time, a woman can go ahead and have it removed at any time. So this is not so simple. Because at some point, the hair extensions do need to be removed, but they must be removed by a professional. A woman really cannot do it on her own. It's something that would have to be removed. So because of that, perhaps because it would have to be removed by a professional, that might be a slight argument, a potential argument for us to go ahead and say that it could be a kula. Now, there are additional questions about, in terms of rove, in terms of how much of the hair or the hairs on a woman's head are covered by these extensions. Rove is a problem even if somebody is not makpid, and we're lenient on hair dye, but that's really a situation where there's no mamashut and it's really never removed. This is a little bit different. It's not so clear that it's an issue of rove. Now, there really is, as we've seen this language before, not necessarily saying something clearly when something is a chatzitza d'oraita or chatzitza even d'rabanan, we would go ahead and say that woman couldn't immerse with it. But here with hair extensions, as we've seen with some of the others, there really is a serious hesitancy to go ahead and permit it lechatchila. Even though it is, as we've seen with others, it is Lenoy, but we're still playing, all of these other factors still play a role. Of course, B'shad Hatzchak, as we've seen, and B'diavad, as Hindi brought up the situation, woman shows up at the mikveh with it, there is definitely a situation that one should go ahead and consult. But just like when one is making the decision preemptively, should I get these hair extensions? When am I going to the mikveh? Lechatchila, there's really serious hesitancy for us to say, yes, you should get that hair extension and you know that you're going to the mikveh, say, tomorrow. Right? It's not usur, but there's serious hesitancy to go ahead and permit it lechatchila.
Definitely something to consult about. Of all of the things we discussed tonight, this is really, it's very complex. It's a very complex question.
More, and even though the nails are complex, these hair extensions also are also in and of itself very complex. And I think that we've seen, yes, makeup might be an area where it's harder to be lenient, but it also has its own set of complexities, as do all of these issues. And our goal tonight, as I started with, and I think as you've seen, is that we want to give you the broad spectrum of the different considerations, the different issues, how, and also to then see how that all plays out and how the different poskin, and then when you are making, when you're making decisions and when you're making all of these considerations, it's what's very important, I think, as we've seen through all of this, is really to go ahead and consult. Have somebody that you call. Certainly Hindi is available, I'm available, the other yoatzot are available. We want to be here for you. We want to support you. We want to go ahead and answer all of your questions. And in particular, when preparing for mikveh, there are emotional issues that can come up. And we want to go ahead and answer your questions. And we want to not only answer your questions, but we also often, and I'm sure Hindi can say the same, that when a woman calls us, we like to give her the background information so that she can go ahead and have a deeper appreciation for the answer that she's given. And that was also part of our goal that we had tonight in sharing all of this information with you. It was a lot of information. And it's really important information. And I think even Hindi and I, in our preparation, we were back and forth in terms of discussion, in terms of how to define certain items, in terms of what to include, what not to include, in terms of being very sensitive about language, and certainly also to being sensitive about the different piskei halacha and the different schools of thought of the different issues that we presented tonight. So with that, Hindi, you want to have any last words?
That was perfect, Bracha. Thank you. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for listening. We hope you learned something. And like we said, we hope that you'll be in touch with us, with Yoatzot Halacha, and with other Rabbanim, with all of the with all of the people in your own communities. Reach out, ask questions, and we hope your experience with Mikveh is always pleasant and beautiful. And we're here to help.
Okay. Thank you so much. Have a good night.